It's a pleasure for me to introduce you the third session, webinar session of IMT-Atlantique and RIKEN joint seminar. So this is the third workshop between IMT-Atlantique and RIKEN. We are organizing every year this kind of event. The idea is try to mix the ideas of two groups, one group in France, one group in Japan, and talking about machine learning and statistical modeling for the ocean, the atmosphere, and climate. So today we will talk about first about acceleration of climate models using machine learning. So this will be presented by Maa. And Maa, she is a pure product of this joint collaboration between IMT-Atlantique and RIKEN, because Maa was studying at IMT-Atlantique and she is now postdoc at RIKEN. And so Maa will be the first to present, and then Simon, my colleague from IMT-Atlantique and a small company, will explain you how he is trying to reconstruct, to interpolate surface currents, oceanic surface currents from vessels. Okay, so I think Maa, if you are ready, you can start. It's a pleasure to hear you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tondeu. Okay, so thank you for having me today. And today, as you said, I'll be talking about accelerating climate model using neural networks. Okay, so here the outline of my talk. So we started the introduction, then we see the different approaches for model acceleration, and then we will present the experiments, the results, and then we'll finish with the conclusion. Okay, introduction. So here, so as you know, to do disaster prevention, we need to have accurate weather forecasting. And to have accurate weather forecasting, we need to have high-resolution climate models. But high-resolution climate models will require supercomputing and large amount of resources. So that's why we need to do acceleration in order to alleviate the cost of high-resolution climate models. So what are the different approaches that we can have in order to do climate model acceleration? So today we'll present and compare three approaches. So the first one would be the process-driven physical model, which we call PDPM. So this is the pure physical model. The second approach is data-driven statistical model. So this is an approach where we have a statistical model, so no physical model at all. We call this approach the DSM. And then we'll have a hybrid approach, which is half physical, half statistical. So we'll call it HPSM. And we will apply these three approaches to a simple climate model, which is a quasi-geostrophic model. And more precisely, we will apply to potential vorticity. So here we see an example of potential vorticity. So here is the output of the QG model, high resolution, and here we see the low resolution. So this is the output, and this is what you want to emulate. So what you want to output with these different approaches. Okay, so we will compare these three approaches, and the baseline would be, in our work, would be the process-driven physical model, so the physical model, which we want to accelerate. Okay, so we will see the different approaches one by one. So the first one is the process-driven physical model. So here we have the QG model. So here is the timeline, and each time step we will apply a high-resolution version of the QG model. Then we will output the field, and then we will apply it continuously. So we'll integrate at each time step in order to have the output. So this is the classical climate model. And this is the model, this is our baseline that we want to accelerate. The second approach is the DDSM, so data-driven statistical model. So here we have our baseline. in blue, the physical model. So at time t0, we will take the output of the physical model, which is a high resolution field, and we will input it into a convolutional neural network that we already trained before. So this convolutional neural network will take this high resolution field at time t0, and then it will predict the high resolution field at time t0 plus 1. And we will continue like that. So each time step, we use the convolutional neural network to predict the next output. So here we see that the convolutional neural network replaces completely the high resolution model. So here is the surrogate approach. So no physical model at all. We are replacing it with a statistical model, which is the convolutional neural network, or CNN. Okay, and then we have our third approach. So this approach is more complex in terms of presentation. So this approach is half physical and half statistical. So here we have our baseline, so the physical model in blue. So at time t0, the physical model outputs a high resolution field. So we'll take this high resolution field, we will upscale it. So we will have a low resolution field. So this low resolution field will be fed to a low resolution model. So this is a low resolution version of the quasi-geostrophic model, QG model. So the physical model will output the next low resolution field. So here we are, this is the physical part of our approach. And then the low resolution field outputted by the low resolution model, the low resolution QG model, will be introduced to a CNN. So this CNN is different from the other CNN because its role is to do downscaling, to do super resolution. So it will take the low resolution field and it will map it to a high resolution field. And we will do that at each time step. So in this approach, we have a low resolution physical model plus a CNN. The low resolution model will will predict the next low resolution field, and the CNN will map the low resolution field to a high resolution field, which we call super resolution. And then we can here, like you see, look at the precision gap between the output of the hybrid approach and the baseline, which is the physical model here in blue. So this is the third approach, which is the hybrid approach. Okay, so these are mainly the three approaches that we have today, and we are going to compare them in order to see which one is more performant in terms of accelerating the computation time and also having accurate results, accurate climate prediction. Okay, so we'll look at the experiment, and in the experiment we'll test all the approaches simultaneously. So here we have our high resolution model, the physical model, the QG model. This is the baseline in blue. So each time step we will run the high resolution QG model, and it will output for us what we call the PDPM output. So the physical model, the process-driven physical model output. At the same time, we will take the output here, so the field here, and we will feed it to a convolutional neural network that will replace the low high resolution model here. So this approach is the DDSM, so the data-driven statistical approach. So here we have the statistical model. So this is the second approach. Okay. And then also we will take the field here and we will introduce it to the low resolution physical model. And then we will use the CNN to do the super resolution. So this is the third approach, which is the HPSM, so the hybrid physical statistical model approach. So here we have the three approaches that we will run in parallel and then compare. We also use here linear interpolation at the output of the low resolution model. And why we do linear interpolation here? Because we want to see what are the capacities of convolutional neural network to do super resolution, which means to map low resolution field to high resolution field. So in order to assess this super resolution capacity of the neural network, we will compare to a standard simple method, which is the linear interpolation. And this linear interpolation will be applied after we apply the low resolution model. So in parallel with the CNN in green. Okay, so here we have the our 4 threads that we will do during the simulation, and then we will compare the outputs and see the performance of each approach. Okay, so here we have the simulation outputs, and here we have the first output, which is 6 hour, the output after 6 hours. So I need to mention here that we have an integration step of 6 hours, so which means this is the first output, which means like we applied these approaches only once. So here this line, and then we will see this is the first result. So here I have our baseline, which is the physical model, the PDPM, process-driven physical model. So here is the output that you want to emulate with other outputs, with other approaches. So here we have the physical model output. Here we have the statistical model output. So here the pure CNN. And we see that the output is pretty close to what you want to predict, okay, with the DDSM. And here we have the hybrid model. So this is statistical model. This is the hybrid model. And also we see with the hybrid model that we have the result is very close to the physical model output. So these two approaches after one time step are quite successful. So here we have the low resolution model plus the linear interpolation. So here we have the hybrid, so low resolution model plus CNN, and here we have low resolution model plus linear interpolation. And we see that the CNN is doing well in predicting all the details when we compare with the linear interpolation. So this is the first time step. Okay, so here after 3 days, which means after 3 days, 24 time steps. Okay, and here we can see when we compare the DSM with the PGPM. So when we compare the statistical approach with the physical statistical output with the physical output, we can see that the statistical model has deviated a lot from the physical model. So we are losing a lot of the details. I have many differences. Here we have the hybrid model, and the hybrid model is still doing quite good in predicting the details. So we can see that we still pretty close to the PGPM, to the physical model. And this is because we are using the low resolution version of the physical model. So we have part physical, part statistical. So we're still not deviating too much from the physical model. And here also linear interpolation plus low resolution model plus linear interpolation to see the impact of the CNN in this approach, in the hybrid approach. Okay, so this is output after 3 days. Here we have the output after 7 days. So GDSM statistical model goes very far, completely different from the PGPM, the physical model. Also, with the hybrid model, we still have we start to have many differences. So we start to have a deviation from the physical model. Okay. And then here we have a 30-day output. So we have here everything is completely different in the in the 3 approaches here. So the HPSM is not doing any good anymore, and also the DSM has deviated completely. Okay, so here we have the output. So we will look at the curves to understand to see when the deviation happens in each approach. Okay, so we look at the results, and first thing in the results we will look at is the predictability range. In order to find the predictability range, we will look at the ACC, so the anomaly correlation coefficient. So here we have the ACC curve for 1 year, and here we have a zoom in for 1 month. So in red we have the GDSM, so the statistical approach. In green we have the HPSM, so the hybrid approach. Okay? And in blue we have the the low resolution model plus linear interpolation. So here we are computing the ACC with regard to the PGPM, so the physical model, which is our baseline. So So here, this is the baseline. So with regard to this, to the PDPM output, we will compute the ACC for each of the three approaches. Okay, so and here we have, so in order to have an acceptable predictability, it has to have an acceptable prediction, it has to have an ACC, an anomaly correlation coefficient, higher than 60%. So here we have the predictability threshold here in black, okay, the dashed line here, okay? And we see that first curve, so the DGSM, the statistical approach, starts quite good, but it drops very quickly. Second one is the HPSM, so it also starts at a good with a good prediction, but also it drops slower than the statistical approach. And here we have the linear and so the low resolution model plus linear interpolation. So it's at the beginning it's worse than the two other approach, but then it's a little better. But anyway, all of them are less than the predictability, the threshold. So if we look here at the zoom, we can see that we can find the predictability range for the exact predictability range for each of the approaches. So for the GDSM, we can see here that the predictability range is about 2 days, and for the HPSM, so the hybrid approach, the predictability range is about 9 days, so 9.25 days. So we can see the importance of having a physical model, a low resolution version of the physical model in order for the CNN not to deviate. So to stop the deviation that can be caused by machine learning if it's not controlled by physical process. And so this is the first part. So it's the first part of the results, so the predictability range. Okay, so our goal is to accelerate the climate model. So we will look at the computation time of each of the approaches. So the PGPM, which is our baseline, is a high resolution QG model. So the DGSM is a CNN, and the HPSM has a low resolution version of the QG model plus CNN that we use for super resolution. So we will look at the computation time for each of the processes of each of the approaches. So if we look at the PGPM here, we have a computation time of 6 seconds for each prediction. So the physical model takes 6 seconds. If we look at the GSM, so the GSM is the statistical approach, so we have only one CNN, and it has around 1.5 seconds for the prediction. If we look at the HPSM, so we have the low resolution model plus the CNN for super resolution, and altogether it adds up to 2 seconds. And here we have the low resolution model plus linear interpolation. This is just to control the CNN here. And it has, so we can see that linear interpolation has a very small time, computation time, but we have seen that it's not accurate. It doesn't add the details of the images. Okay. So if we look at the computation time reduction factor, we can see that the GDSM reduces the computation time by a factor of 4. Okay, and then the HPSM reduces the computation time by a factor of 3. Okay, so here we can, from these two slides, we can conclude that the HPSM is doing much better than the DGSM for the predictability range, and also it has a good acceleration computation time reduction factor. So it reduces the time by a factor of 3. So these are the comparison between these two approaches. So we can see that the hybrid can conclude that the hybrid approach is more efficient and also have a good predictability range here. Okay. Okay. So for the next steps, so for now we have worked on a QG model, so which is a very simple physical model. So next step would be, and we also worked on a single variable, which is the potential vorticity. Next step would be to work on a multi-variable model acceleration. So we'll test other variables in the same QG model. So we'll try other things than potential vorticity. And also we'll try to combine multiple variables and see how it works with multiple variables. And this is for the QG model, but we want also to apply the different approaches to other climate models like scale, and we want to see if it still functions in more complex models. Okay, and then we also want to try different performance verification methods to do evaluation, because for now we are doing computation time, ACC, and also mean absolute error, but we want to explore more with machine learning. Okay, so this is mainly what you have done for comparing different approaches for model acceleration. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Ma. It was very clear.
Okay.
Okay, so we have time for 10 minutes of question. So do not hesitate. You can directly speak. Okay, I can start maybe, Ma. I have a few couple of questions. So thank you very much, because it was very clear, the presentation, and I like the way you define the three approaches, and how you explain it. It was very clear, and also like the comparison with the linear interpolation, uh, which is a very common approach to do machine learning. And in lot of recent work in deep learning, especially, they do not compare to linear interpolation, which is the most easier technique, and this is nice to see the difference between your CNN and the linear interpolation. So yes, I have question first about the CNN, and what do you have inside really? Is it a classic multi-layer perceptron, or is it something more evaluated?
So yeah, so for this project, we are using very classical CNN. So it's like so we have the convolution layers and then the pooling layers. So it's a very classical convolution neural network for the moment. So for this project, we didn't use more complex like
Okay.
architectures. So it's like
Okay.
stacked convolution layers with the pooling layers and yeah,
Yeah.
classical architecture.
Okay. And yes, I have a question about the metric you use to compare the different methods. So here you are talking about the ACC metric, and you talk about that in your perspective, trying to use other metric to compare the method. But yes, I think it's definitely very important to use other metrics, especially here you are interpolate. You are trying to emulate, let's say, the potential vorticity. Okay, so the vorticity is related to the current, basically. So basically, what it can be nice. I mean, this is just a remark, but it can be nice to have a metric which is able to see if I mean, the power of the current in your simulation is acceptable. And because I think if you use, for instance, linear interpolation, this is what we see in your result. You see that you smooth the vorticity a lot, I think. So you have so you are reducing the value of the velocities in your output. So I think this is just a remark, but I think this kind of metrics related to the kinetic energy or something like that could be very interesting in the future. But this is maybe what you plan to do.
No, I really, because yeah, this is a very important and very interesting point, because for the moment we're not using any verification method based on physics, because like I'm coming from machine learning backgrounds. I don't know much about those metrics, but I think it's very important to have these types of metrics to do the evaluation. Because for us, we are using like yeah, classical machine learning, the classical machine learning verification methods, but they are not like, we are not sure that we are respecting the physical, like how to say,
Yeah.
like we are not respecting the physics when like the physical laws when you are applying doing the predictions. So it's absolutely important to have these metrics. But for the most part, we didn't plan to do that, but this is very important. So I think we should consider it in our plan. Thank you.
Okay, maybe another question from French people or Japanese people.
Well, is it okay if I ask
Yes.
about the physics and how to understand how this how your machine learning is somehow recovering information at small scales? So if I understand correctly, in your hybrid method, the first step is LRM. So based on that, you get some vorticity distribution, which is like your figure at lower right. It's a low resolution field. And then somehow the machine learning is able to recover the fine scale structure, which surprises me. I wonder how it's done, but I guess it knows, roughly speaking, how should I say, it has learned a kind of a typical structure of a shear layer and other so-called coherent structures, which statistically tend to appear. So it will take a kind of fuzzy structure and it will compress it in the right direction to recover somehow a kind of an accurate high resolution field. Is my interpretation correct?
Yeah, yeah, I think yeah, because when we train, so yeah, the model should learn those small scale details. Yes, but I think yes. Mhm.
I wonder, have people examined this in terms of energy cascade, or perhaps entropy cascade? I believe this is a two-dimensional model.
Yes.
So, people in physics have looked at the entropy cascade and so on. And I wonder, have people analyzed the action? How should I say? Analyzed how the machine learning is, well, anyway, interpret the action of the machine learning in terms of the physics of entropy or other quantities.
So as I said to Professor Tondio, we are still like looking only at the statistical part of the project, so we didn't have done that yet. But it's very interesting to analyze the physics of how the machine learning is working and how is it related to physics and whether it's like it goes with the laws or not. But for the moment, we didn't do any type of analysis, but it's very interesting, and I think we should consider that in our future plans.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Mhm.
Thank you, John, and good evening. I completely agree with you. I think in the diagnostic, you should incorporate the energy spectrum to have to try to see if it's correctly predicted by your different machine learning methods. And also, maybe it's related to what John is saying. It's maybe in your cost function, you can include this kind of physical behavior. You want to have, for instance, a cascade energy decrease, and you can maybe include that in your cost function. I'm sure there are some people working on that, and this can be, I think, useful in your CNN to include this information, to have a simulation which is physically consistent.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Maybe another question or comment?
Can I ask one question? This is Otsuka. I'm a co-author, so sorry about that. Yeah. So I noticed that the linear interpolation outperforms for longer forecast. I'm wondering if you can improve the hybrid system so that the hybrid system can outperform for all the time steps.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know the hybrid system uses the low resolution system, so it should have some information. And maybe this is because of the training data set. HPSM somehow overfits to the training data. That's
Yeah.
my understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, yes, the HPSM is like more complex than this one, so it should like outperform it all the time. But for now, like we are doing the training like in these when we are the very first steps. Okay? So we do the training for the first step, like when we are close to the physical model. So this is why it works better here. But for the moment, this part was neglected. Like longer time steps, longer time span was neglected in the training. So that's why we have linear interpolation outperforming HPSM. I think it's absolutely possible to improve it with the training and to have the curve to be in the upper here.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.